Welcome. Welcome to the online class of Professor S.K. Paul, HOD, University Department of English, Bihar University, Muzaffarpur. Good afternoon, dear students of PG Semester 1, CC2, Unit 1. I am going to deliver my lecture on Hamlet. The topic, as mentioned here, Actwise summary and analysis of Hamlet. So it's a kind of introduction. I'm going to tell you the summary of Shakespeare's play Hamlet. So I begin here. In Act 1, Scene 1, we have this story, this summary. On a gun platform atop the battlements of Castle Elsinore, Officer Bernardo arrives to relieve Sentinel Francisco of his watch. Bernardo challenges Francisco to identify himself first, and the two exchange a small talk about the weather. Francisco complains for this relief. Much thanks. It's a bitter cold, and I'm sick at heart. So Horatio and Marcellus enter and greet Francisco, identifying themselves as loyal Danish subjects, and Francisco exits. Marcellus asks Bernardo if he has seen this apparition tonight, and Bernardo assures him that he has seen nothing. Marcellus tells Bernardo that he has invited Horatio to see the ghost himself, as he trusts Horatio to approve our eyes and speak to it. Horatio doubts the ghost will appear, but listens intently as Bernardo prepares to retell the tale of the ghost's previous visitation. Before Bernardo can say much, however, the ghost appears, and Marcellus encourages Horatio to address the spirit. Horatio cannot deny that he too sees the ghost. All three men agree that the ghost is real. In fact, they recognize it as the majesty of buried Denmark, the recently dead King Hamlet. They entreat the ghost to say and talk about saying all three men agree that the ghost is real. In fact, they recognize it as the majesty of buried Denmark, the recently dead King Hamlet. They entreat the ghost to say and talk, but it dissolves into the night, saying he would not believe had he not seen for himself. Horatio is astounded to have seen the ghost of King Hamlet dressed in armor he wore then he conquered old King Fortinbras and defeated the Poles. He finds the king's dress ironic because at that moment young Fortinbras, the dead Norwegian king's son and namesake, has just declared war on the Danes, seeking to avenge his father's death and take back the land King King Hamlet took from old Fortinbras, because the Danes are preparing for war against the Norwegians. Bernardo wonders if the ghost portends a doom for the Danes. Horatio shudders, recalling the omens that warned Julius Caesar of his imminent demise. The ghost reappears, and Horatio entreats it to say, The crowing cock trumpets the arrival of morning, however, and Horatio realizes that no erring spirit can stay out in the daylight. They watch the ghost disappear into the dissolving darkness, certain that they have seen the ghost of King Hamlet. They decide to inform Prince Hamlet. The spooky cold the spooky cold that Francisco describes as he and Bernardo exchange posts thoroughly sets the mood of their play, which Yale professor Maynard Mack describes as mysterious and equivocal, a mixture of bright surface and dark forces, where what seems both is and is not. This scene shows very clearly the problem of discerning between appearance and reality. The ghost appears, but is it really there? If it is there, is it really a devil assuming the king's regal shape and garments? Distinguishing between truth and illusion is the local dilemma of Act 1 and will challenge Hamlet right up to the play's turning out. The ghost appears, but is it really there? If it is there, is it really a devil assuming the king's regal shape and garments? Distinguishing between truth and illusion is the focal dilemma of Act 1 and will challenge Hamlet right up to the play's turning point in Scene 4 of Act 4. Bernardo's questioning of Francisco introduces the idea that Hamlet's world is upside down. Protocol dictates that Francisco should question the newcomer, but here the interloper questions the guard. Francisco's response reinforces the sense of malaise. His sickness at heart prefigures the tension of the ensuing tragedy, while the changing of the guard mirrors the tenuousness of the political climate of Denmark, the transition from one king to another, and the arrival of the prince whose rightful place on the throne has been usurped. In this first scene of Hamlet, Shakespeare introduces a set of mirrors that will pervade throughout. Fortinbras, a young man whose father has been defeated by a foe and whose obligation is to avenge that father's death and reclaim the conquered properties, serves as a foil for Hamlet. Several characters will reflect Hamlet, but Fortinbras is the first to be named in the play in whom we see a likeness to the Prince of Denmark. Fortinbras has significance to the play, has significant role to play, a significant role to play. The first scene presages an important thematic thread in Hamlet that the passing of the torch from old to young inevitably carries the duty of the young to live up to their elders' expectations. A son must obey a father's instruction, no matter how unreasonable the directive might seem, even if the directive necessitates murder, war, or mayhem. In scene 1, Horatio explains that because young Fortinbras is bent on avenging his father's defeat at old King's Hamlet's hand, all of Denmark prepares for war. A single covenant inexorably propels the events of the play and is the medieval truth that rules Hamlet's life. Horatio's fear of the ghost mirrors the prevailing attitude toward witches and ghosts among Elizabethans and Jacobeans. Shakespeare's contemporaries believed in ghosts and closely linked apparitions with their religious fears of the devil's power and hell's dominion on earth. Like witches, ghosts were believed to be agents of an afterlife, unlike witches. However, they were not universally dreaded. While witches always represent the evil, ghosts might actually represent the spirit of God. A ghost could represent angel or devil to the Shakespearean sensibility. According to the religious precepts of the time, anyone seeing a ghost must identify the ghost's purpose and form. A ghost could be a hallucination which was dangerously apt to be endangered by the devil. Second, secondly, a restless spirit returned to perform a deed left undone in life. And thirdly, a spectre seen as a prediction or warning sent as a gift from God. Fourth, a spirit returned from beyond the grave by divine permission. Or five, a devil disguised as a dead person. Characters in Hamlet test each of these possibilities within the course of the play. The dead king's armor suggests that the ghost should be a soldier returned to finish a job left undone, an omen for the troubled country he once ruled, and a spirit roaming with divine permission. Horatio dwells on the idea of portents, thus shedding another light on the way to illuminate several other motives. Horatio's worrying about the impending attack on Denmark by Fortinbras and his Norwegians reveals another of the many mirrors that layer the play. Fortinbras's honor compels him to attack the established Danes in order to avenge his father, despite the fact that he lacks the funds to pay his warriors. Old Fortinbras and young Fortinbras, old Hamlet and young Hamlet, and old Polonius and young Laertes continually exemplify Shakespeare's preoccupation with filial duty and devotion. Marcellus' reference to Christianity establishes the very Christian context of Hamlet. Marcellus notes that the ghost stalks away when heaven is invoked, and also mentions Christmas and our Saviour's birth. These comments clearly define the religious perspective of the characters in the play, which reflect Shakespeare's own reputedly Catholic point of view. Act 1, Scene 1 introduces imagery suggesting that Elsinore is itself a prison where impending war and disaster are inevitable, that forces beyond human control threaten all hope of happiness or well-being. Now, Act 1, Scene 2. So, all summary. Only summary. In a trumpet flourish, Claudius, the new king of Denmark, and his wife Gertrude entered their stateroom in the company of various countries, including Prince Hamlet, Claudius's AD Polonius's son Laertes, and the ambassadors to Norway, Voltimand and Cornelius. Claudius explains that he and Gertrude have chosen to marry immediately after his brother's death because, in light of the encroaching Danish army, the court could not afford excessive grief lest young Fortinbras mistake their mourning for weakness. He dispatches Voltimand and Cornelius to inform young Fortinbras's uncle of the young man's campaign against the Danes, as Claudius is himself Fortinbras's uncle, is brother to the recently dead king and currently controls the throne. Claudius hopes that the old man has the power to stop Fortinbras from carrying out his mission. Claudius then turns his attention to Laertes, who petitions the king for permission to return to school in France. Claudius confers with Polonius, who answers verbosely that he consents to Laertes' wish. Having dismissed Laertes, the king and queen both notice Hamlet's dark demeanor, and Hamlet sneers at the king's loving posture. Gertrude and Claudius encourage him to cease grieving and to get on with life. Gertrude asks Hamlet why he seems so particularly affected by his father's death, and Hamlet snaps at her that, unlike his mother and her husband, he has no pretenses. Seems, madam, nay, it is. Hamlet accuses Gertrude of pretending grief and rejoicing in the old king's death. Claudius reminds Hamlet that he is next in line to the throne and asks him not to return to school in Wittenberg, a request that Gertrude reiterates. Acquiesces. Hamlet acquiesces without enthusiasm, satisfied that they have had their way. Claudius and Gertrude have leave Hamlet to his own thoughts. In his first soliloquy, Hamlet becomes the fact that he cannot commit suicide. He wishes that his physical self might just cease to exist, melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. This first soliloquy of Hamlet is really so attracting, is so reflecting. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. He complains that his religion prohibits suicide and claims that he would sooner die than continue watching his mother engage in her vile incest. These thoughts torment him, but he knows that he can't speak them aloud to anyone. Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo enter, and Hamlet unguarded with Horatio as with no one else, snidely jokes that King Claudius had sought to save money by using the funeral refreshments to feed his wedding guests. He tells Horatio that his father's memory haunts him. Horatio seizes the opportunity to tell Hamlet about his encounter with the ghost of the old king. Hamlet agrees to watch that night in case the ghost walks again. It is significant that Claudius admonishes Hamlet as he addresses him for the first time in the play. Claudius is clearly the antagonist, and he begins his hour upon the stage in a blatantly adversarial role, where Claudius's demeanor not enough to tell the audience that the two are rivals. Hamlet underscores the discomfort of their relationship by asserting his disgust for the man with his own opening statement. The key words, the key words that exemplify uh, the critical purpose of this scene include show, seem, and play. Cornelius and Voltimand say they will show our duty. Laertes came to Denmark to show his allegiance to King Claudius. Gertrude asks Hamlet in reference to his knighted color, why seems it so particular with thee? Hamlet responds to her question by using the word seems twice in a single sentence, and he says he cannot pretend but rather must be what he is. He then goes on to say that the moods and shapes of a grief are true for him. Through his emotions may seem to be those of an actor, he is not acting. Everything in his sin points to the challenge of discerning appearance from reality, a challenge that becomes more pronounced when Horatio tells Hamlet about the appearance of the ghost. Claudius's calculating nature becomes immediately apparent, always conscious of appearances, of what seems to be. He speaks of Gertrude as our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, and then addresses Hamlet as his cousin Hamlet and my son. He has considered his relationships to the state, to Gertrude, and to Hamlet in all the ways people might perceive them, and manages to cover himself entirely. He has prepared explanations for both his hasty marriage to Gertrude and for the fact that though fewer than 2 months have elapsed, the country no longer mourns King Hamlet's passing, and not even the grieving widow misses him when Claudius turns on Hamlet and accuses him of impious stubbornness. He is clearly asserting his position of power over the younger man as well as over his kingdom. He scores Hamlet in a manner befitting a concerned a parent and a responsible monarch. The act fails to impress Hamlet, but Claudius remains unaware that his ruse proved itself ineffective. Dear students, you will take snapshots of my lecture and then post it on the class group. Okay? You will just take snapshots. So Claudius further invalidates Hamlet by demeaning the young man's self-image, accusing Hamlet of possessing a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, and an understanding simple and unschooled. Claudius defines Hamlet as inadequate to the task of being king. This accusation justifies his own ascension to his brother's throne, despite the fact that the king rightly belongs to the old king's true heir, Hamlet. Every word Claudius chooses, including the condescension implied in his calling Hamlet my cousin and my son, reiterates his superiority and complete control. The incest between Claudius and Gertrude remains at the forefront of Hamlet's mind in his scene. He is most aware of this incest horror, although he suspects other crimes as well. By the end of the play, Hamlet will call Claudius a murderous damned den, and the king will have multiple crimes to answer for. At this moment, however, the medieval English prohibition on sexual intimacy between a brother, albeit a brother in law and sister, serves as the primary focus for Hamlet's rage, though though Gertrude's guilt equals Claudius's in this case. Hamlet directs his fury at Claudius and merely mistrusts his mother. This scene illustrates the actor's challenge in interpreting Gertrude's character. Gertrude's demeanor in this scene is innocent. She genuinely appears to desire happiness for Hamlet, to desire him to stay and be her dutiful son, seemingly naive and ingenious. He contrasts starkly with Claudius, who calculates his every word and move to have an effect on his assemblage. If she is less forthright and honest than she appears here, Shakespeare gives no hint. However, as the play unfolds, we increasingly question Gertrude's innocence in order to make the portrayal believable. The actress must commit to whether Gertrude is playing a role or whether she is genuine. The disparity, the disparity between appearance and their reality, the disparity between appearance and reality becomes a pervasive thematic motive in Hamlet. The ghost in scene one established the lack of clear lines between the real and the perceived, but the web of deceit and we and bewilderment in this scene casts a shadow that will hover over the breadth of the play. In this response to Gertrude's supplication that he abandon his grief, Hamlet assures her that he is not one to make shows of grief that a man might play. Hamlet asserts that he is not merely costumed in his black attire, nor is he prone to dramatic sighs or profuse weeping. He is genuinely grieved and honestly critical of Gertrude's and Claudius's callousness toward the loss of their husband and brother. To Hamlet, all others are making show. Hamlet's preoccupation with hypocrisy surfaces more profoundly in his first soliloquy. The fact that his mother has joined in an incestuous union with her husband's brother less than a month after the father's death overwhelms Hamlet. A simple beast without the reasoning skills of a human being would have shown more respect for a dead mate, mourns Hamlet. Worse yet, Hamlet must question her judgment. Hamlet sees Claudius as a satire, a beast man driven by his appetites, whereas old Hamlet was Hyperion, the sun god himself. How can he trust a woman who would trade a god for a goat? In addition to his cynicism toward women, Hamlet's self-portrait begins to emerge in this soliloquy when he says that his uncle Claudius corresponds to his father, King Hamlet, no more than I to Hercules. Hamlet discloses his pacifistic demeanor. Hercules was a warrior who acted on impulse and charged enthusiastically into battles without questioning the ideology of the fight. Unlike Hercules, Hamlet drowns in words and perpetually struggles toward understanding. Now, Act 1, Scene 3. Please keep on taking snapshots and post it on the group. Once or two is not enough. Time to time you will take snapshots. So now come back to Act 1, Scene 3. In Polonius's chambers, Laertes prepares to return to school in Paris. He counsels his sister Ophelia to spurn the advances of her suitor, Prince Hamlet. He explains that to Hamlet she can never be anything more than a plaything. Leatrice, Hamlet. Leatrice tells Ophelia he is of a higher rank than she and cannot choose with whom he will spend his life. To protect her heart and to safeguard her honor, Leatrice asserts that Ophelia should reject Prince Hamlet before he deflowers her. Ophelia jokingly chides her brother to be careful lest he be one of those libertines who recks not his own reed, does not take his own advice. Polonius enters and offers Laertes a lengthy advice on how to live in Paris. He spouts a string of aphoristic cliches enumerating the shoulds and shouldn'ts of a young man's life. Laertes agrees, telling Polonius what he really must be going and reminding Ophelia of his directive to her. She promises to take his advice and to lock it safely in her heart. Polonius asks Ophelia what she and Laertes were discussing, and she tells him that Laertes advised her about Prince Hamlet. Polonius launches into his own diatribe on the subject, saying that Hamlet is a red-blooded male who wants her for only one purpose, and that she must spurn his advances. Ophelia promises to obey her father and break off her relationship with the prince. Laertes offers his overprotective advice genuinely, but his tone is that of a prepared speech, and he shows neither real awareness of nor consideration for Ophelia's feelings. In fact, he never consults her, but rather speaks at her in metaphorical posturing that underscores her feminine inferiority. Shakespeare's choice of blank verse over iambic pentameter for Laertes' speech serves as a stage direction for the actor playing the role. The character is not a man of deep thought or fancy language, but rather a pragmatist, a careful courtier, more concerned with being correct than with emotional depth. Shakespeare aptly underscores the fact that Laertes is the perfect foil for Hamlet. His rehearsed political sounding speech patterns oppose Hamlet's emotional, flowery, and heart heavy ruminations. He has memorized his speech as if it were taken from the schoolboy copybook, and he shows that he is vain and ordinary with limited intellectual capabilities. This scene begins to reveal how Laertes might be similar to Hamlet and decidedly different. Polonius lives in a world of show. His instructions in social etiquette may have ethical substance but lack practical soundness for Laertes. When he speaks to Ophelia, he treats her the way one would expect a man of his time and stature to treat a daughter as property. A woman should bring honor and fortune to her family, and the image Ophelia projects for him very much concerns Polonius. He is sure that Hamlet would never choose Ophelia to wife, hence he amuses himself with off-color allusions to Hamlet's intentions and dashes any hopes she might have that her father would help her make a match. Through Polonius and Laertes, Shakespeare introduces another motif of the play that self indulgence and vanity often obscure familial devotion. Ophelia's dilemma is salient in the scene. Both Laertes and Polonius tell her that the man that she loves is using her, that that he will discard her, and that she should not trust her own heart. She is dutiful daughter because her father has taught her to be seen and not heard. He listens and promises to honor the men's wishes. No choice remains to her now but to break off all relations with Hamlet. But what if they have already consummated their love? What if he has already sworn to her that he loves her and would never forsake her? Whom should she believe? Though Shakespeare tells us nothing to help us see into her heart, the actress playing Ophelia must know what she feels about Hamlet. Most critics agree that Ophelia and Hamlet have already been intimate. Then Ophelia is deeply smitten with true love for the prince, and that her father and brother's words hurt her deeply. Were this conjecture not true, Ophelia's motivation for her subsequent actions would be questionable. Now, Act 1, Scene 4. Now I'm going to discuss Scene 4. In accordance with their plan, Horatio and Marcellus meet Hamlet on the battlements of the castle. A trumpet sounds, and the prince bitterly comments on the king's propensity for wine and revelry. He disapproves of his behavior as it reflects badly on all Danes and gives them a reputation for darkness that makes them the butt of jokes. He points out that people often judge a man of great stature by his smallest mole of nature and not by his strength. Before the discussion can go further, Horatio notices the ghost's arrival. Despite the uncertainty as to whether the ghost airs from heaven or blasts from hell, or whether the ghost harbors wicked or charitable intentions, Hamlet immediately identifies the apparition as his father. He empowers the ghost to explain the purpose of his visit and charges the spirit to speak and make things clear. The ghost beckons Hamlet to follow, and despite the entreaties of his comrades to beware, Hamlet follows the spirit into the night. Again, Hamlet reveals his preoccupation with the disparity between appearance and reality. Claudius appears to be a powerful man, yet harbors a decided weakness for wine and revelry. Thus, says Hamlet, Claudius makes all Danes seem drunkards to their critics and attracts disrespect from both allies and enemies. Just as an individual's weaknesses can overshadow all virtue, so one Swedish man, especially a Swedish leader, can overshadow all virtuous compatriots. Hamlet completes his critique of the new king satire the very moment before the old king, the great Hyperion himself, appears. Claudius's evil habits garner more suspicions than the ghost's motives. The true evil lies in the heart of the successor, and the degeneracy of the court reflects the necessary outcome of foul deeds. Hamlet's speech about Claudius's carousing is important on a number of levels. Critics refer to this speech as the dram of evil speech, because Hamlet ends it by saying, "The dram of evil doth all the noble substance of a doubt to his own scandal." In this speech, Hamlet indicts the Danish people, including himself, he is after all to the manner born for their hedonism. Large appetites for wine and revelry indicate the kind of dissipation that weakens cultures and usurps nations. The fact that Swedish behavior characterizes the Danish collective reputation embarrasses Hamlet. Critics have viewed Hamlet a latter-day morality play in which Hamlet, a sort of Renaissance everyman, must navigate through moral depravity toward the light of reason and good deeds to find his way to the righteousness. His sense of honor drives him to do the right thing, but the right thing actually contradicts God's law. Hamlet is torn between right rather than right and wrong. Hamlet's definition of the subjective right differs drastically from Claudius's definition. As A.C. Bradley points out, Hamlet uh, cares for nothing so much as he cares for human worth, and Hamlet has an aversion to evil. In fact, Bradley suggests that we might consider the play a tragedy of moral idealism as much as a tragedy of reflection. The drama of evil doth all the noble substance of doubt to his own scandal, disputed passage. Perhaps a line is missing. The general meaning seems to be that it takes only a small portion of evil to bring a scandal on the entire substance, however noble it may otherwise be. Spirit of health. There are two possible meanings. First, a saved, healthy soul and not a lost one. A second, a healing or a beneficent spirit. Goblin, damned agent of the evil. Hamlet, from the very first, seems to question the authenticity of the ghost as the spirit of his father. Now, scene 5, Act 1, scene 5. Back on the parapet, in the outer walls of Castle Elsinore, Hamlet follows the ghost, who admits that he is the spirit of King Hamlet and tells his son to hear him out. His time is short before he must return to purgatory. He cannot share any of the secrets of life in purgatory, but he has a tale of woe he desperately needs to pass on to his son. Before he will give Hamlet any details, however, he charges the prince to avenge his murder. The words of the ghost horrify Hamlet, for they confirm his fears. Hurrying because he can scent the morning. King Hamlet tells his son that Claudius seduced his seemingly virtuous queen and then crept to where his brother, lay napping and poured a lethal poison in King Hamlet's ear. The poison quickly curdled King Hamlet's blood, robbing him of both his life and the opportunity of absolution. The ghost tells Hamlet to remember me, but only after he instructs him to leave Gertrude alone. So Hamlet must wrest retribution only from Claudius. The ghost exits, leaving Hamlet incensed. Hamlet answers the worried calls of Horatio and Marcellus, telling them nothing specific but demanding that they both take an oath to tell no one what they have seen and heard. In confidence, Hamlet tells Horatio that he will pretend to be mad so that he may spy on his mother and uncle. After Horatio has sworn allegiance, Hamlet bids the departed ghost to rest and then curses his fate before exiting with the other men. King Hamlet's ghost introduces himself in a way that most certainly evoked the sympathy of the Elizabethan audience. He tells Hamlet that his brother robbed him of everything he was, all that he owned, including the everlasting soul, in the same way that the Bible engenders sympathy for Abel and condemns Cain for the fratricide. Shakespeare favors the murdered brother. Hamlet is quick to believe the ghost because the spirit's words confirm his worst fear. Claudius murdered King Hamlet. For the Elizabethan Jacobean audience who attended the first performances of Hamlet, murder of a king was in itself cause for alarm. Consider that the English people believed that their monarchs ruled by divine right, that God Himself appointed them to rule the land. The Church of England went so far as to attribute to the monarch the highest order of executive power in the church as well. In all ways, the English monarch represented God on earth. King Hamlet's murder makes the ghost a most sympathetic figure to Shakespeare's audience. No one would have questioned the existence of that ghost, and few would have believed, even for a moment, as Hamlet does, that the ghost could be a devil. The fact that his brother's that his sorry, the fact that his mother's lover is also her husband's murderer exacerbates Gertrude's crime of incest. Hamlet is bereft of choice. He may have an aversion to violence, and he may live by strict Christian principles, but he must avenge his father's honor. Hamlet sees no way to honor his father except by killing Claudius. Doubly impelled by his father's orders and by tradition, Hamlet becomes a prisoner of his obligation for revenge. The major conflict here is obvious. Christianity negated the Hebraic notion of an eye for an eye. The notion seemed barbaric to the Renaissance population. Further, the medieval custom of a blood feud, wherein the closest relative of a murdered man must avenge the death, and death had become passe. Society more often supported the notion of mercy and forgiveness, concepts Shakespeare explored in an earlier play. Merchant of Venice. In Merchant, the audience despises the antagonist precisely because he insists on a blood feud. In Hamlet, Shakespeare asks the audience to empathize with Hamlet's desire for redress. Hamlet is a sympathetic character precisely because the notion of revenge drives him wild in Christian morality and in inclination simultaneously exhort him to be charitable. The major issues of the play are now out in the open and conjoined. By marrying Claudius, Gertrude has committed incest and has failed to carry out her duties to her slain husband. In Claudius, because of his duplicity, these sins are unforgivable. How his people perceive him concerns Claudius more than making things right with Hamlet, Gertrude, or the people of Denmark. On the other hand, Gertrude is a woman who has been led by her weakness and frailty to follow the charismatic devil of a king to his bed. Hamlet swears Horatio and Marcellus to secrecy and garners further support from his audience. His genuine leadership capability and honest friendship for Horatio inspire great loyalty from the two men, and that loyalty is clearly Hamlet's earned to reward for his strength of character. Hamlet tells Horatio that he plans to feign madness before the king and the court. The madness will render him invisible so that he might observe and discern the best way and time for his revenge. Hamlet's meaning here remains ambiguous. Is his madness a mask, a costume, a lie? The answer to this question provides the key to Hamlet's characterization, and an actor playing the role must decide what that putting on signifies. In some portrayals, Hamlet pretends to be mad. In others, while he may believe he is pretending, he is quite mad. In still others, Hamlet's madness grows as he develops. In other again, Hamlet is a child who can't grow up and accept the burdens of adulthood, which include his duties to his slain father. Shakespeare seems to have deliberately left Hamlet's ruse ambiguous enough so that the performances of the role may vary. Thank you, dear students. I have finished my lecture for today. Again, I will meet you next time. So, thank you all students. Thank you for your patient. Okay, thank you. Have you taken snapshots? Okay, just okay. Every day in every class you will take snapshots of your faculty and yourself, and then you will post on the group. Only these things may be posted. Okay, so fine. Now go. Okay, now go and enjoy and have your lunch, I suppose. Yes.